Hello, I'm Kathy Ramsperger. I'm a lifelong journalist, humanitarian, and author of the award-winning The Shores of Our Souls and the upcoming 1,000 Flying Things. I'm also a coach who founded Ground One and created Step Into Your Story. Welcome to my story hour and welcome to the gifted novelist, Johnnie Bernhard. Welcome, Johnnie.
Thank you, Kathy. Wonderful to be with you today.
So I'm here to connect people, both readers and writers, who love books. I concentrate mainly on transformational stories of international interest, multicultural relations, and social justice, because that's what I write. And that's what we'll be talking about today, because Johnnie does as well. A little bit about Johnnie. A former teacher and journalist, novelist Johnnie Bernhard grew up in Texas and now resides in Mississippi. Hannah and Ariela is her fourth novel, and I should mention that all four were traditionally published by university presses in Texas. All of her books are award-winning and have been selected reads from a long list of book clubs, bookstores, and other venues. Her last book that you may have heard us chat about in 2020, Sisters of the Undertow, was chosen by the Association of University Presses as one of the 100 best books published by academic presses. And after you watch this, check out Johnnie's TEDx talk that I believe happened the same year. But today we're talking about Johnnie's newest and most timely novel. It's called Hannah and Ariela and is getting lots of buzz, not only because of its craft and voice. Those are givens when you're talking about Johnnie's writing, but because it deals with maybe one of, if not the most toughest issue our nation is dealing with today, and has been actually as long as I can remember. Definitely all my adult life. It just keeps getting worse and worse. Before we talk to Johnnie, though, I'd like to just give a little bit of praise about her novel. Publishers Weekly said Bernhard dispenses vivid details of Hannah and Ariela piecemeal while establishing the characters in broad strokes as empathetic archetypes. Hannah's a strong, independent woman who, I might add, is recently widowed and intent upon staying independent. Ariela is a teen with average teen desires, and she lives in Mexico. Other narrators weigh in, including Hannah's daughter-in-law, a border agent, the girl's priest, and a Texas county sheriff. With the spectrum of perspectives, Bernhard illustrates the dangers of life along the border and the domino effect that the actions of one can have on others. That domino effect is definitely there and is part of real life, and a lot of people forget about that. And in the New York Journal of Books, which I also review for, in this tensely wired, swiftly paced, starkly realistic story of human trafficking set beautifully among nuanced, clashing cultures, author Johnnie Bernhard defines each character's motivation to portray the collision of opposing sides while casting a wide lens on a human atrocity. Hannah and Ariela is the story of one woman's bravery in rescuing another, only to rise phoenix-like into a newly defined, far-reaching life purpose. And I add that it gives me great hope in my 60s that you are writing about a character such as Hannah. I was also honored to be an early reader of this book, and here's a little bit of my review. A study in contrasts and candor, this timely story is full of tense scenes and taut writing. It's told skillfully and alternating multiple points of view, every one of them convincing and memorable. I loved all the characters, including the play by the rules biracial border patrol officer, and the small town cheese puff loving sheriff, who form an oddball rescue team. I loved their foil-like nature, and they do bring in a little bit of humor in the novel's otherwise spine-chilling moments. This novel reminded me of how these trafficking stories play out every single day with more frequency than ever along the Mexican-US border. It's interesting which characters avert their eyes and try to help Ariela, and it's not the ones that you'd think. Since Johnnie lives in Mississippi, which has the second highest rate of human trafficking in the nation, she's written a book that will not let us avert our attention. Her words ring off the page with a frank honesty that will move you. They definitely moved me. And I worked for 25 years as a humanitarian. And it's my hope that they will also move you to action. Congratulations, Johnnie.
Thank you, Kathy.
So I want to ask a question for the writers just to begin, and then we'll dive into the book. I've known you since the first book, which has been almost one a year, 2017. And how has this launch and the book events surrounding it differed from the first three? I'd love to hear about the writer's journey.
Well, the writer's journey, and I think every writer can reflect upon this, is a difficult one. Starting out in that first book, traditionally published, a difficult literary agent that didn't necessarily believe that the genre was literary fiction or upmarket fiction. And so in that beginning, she wanted to make it more commercial and Christian fiction. I knew enough about Christian fiction. Every day's a zippity-doo-dah day. People aren't drunk, people don't commit a crime. You know, of course, there's a hiccup now and there, but it's very homogenized.
Mm-hmm.
And kudos to that genre. There's a genre for every writer and for every reader, and I understand that, but that wasn't what I was writing. So in saying all that and receiving over 100 rejection letters, because maybe a publisher wanted me to take out a huge element of the story or to add this to the story to make it more commercial, I didn't, because I believed in those characters. Mm-hmm. And I knew, as a journalist and a lover of great literature my entire life, I was an English teacher, what could be better teaching beautiful literature to young minds that are still open? I just realized I'm an orange. I cannot be an apple. This is who I am as a writer. And you have to believe in your story. So the entire retrospective is to any writer that's starting out, you've got to believe in what you're writing and what you're trying to say to the audience, the reader, the impact you're trying to make with your words. Because if you don't, especially with that first book, you'll be blown in every direction. It's much like, you know, as we mature as women, when we're young, we might not necessarily know who we are. We're still learning. But if we don't follow our true path and who we are authentically, we'll be lost. We'll be just blowing in the wind. Anybody can send us this or that direction. And I don't think it's any different for a writer. I try to approach it as a profession. I tried to learn everything I could about it. I went to conferences, I read, I kept reading great literature, great writers, current, the classics, because I firmly believe reading and writing go hand in hand. If you're not reading great novels while you're trying to write, you're hurting yourself. And that's not to say to get great ideas, but you're studying the craft. So from that very arduous beginning to where I am now with Hannah and Ariela and its launch, it's much easier. I have an audience. I've proven myself in some literary awards, and what I'm trying to say as a writer, that it was much easier to move to a solid publisher. So I was very fortunate to publisher my first 3 books. It was just a very small university press, to a university press that's been around for over 50 years. And what they can offer in the editing process and with marketing, it's been such a wonderful gift. I'm very appreciative of it.
I'm so happy for you. I love that you're saying believe in your book, and I agree that it's worth it most days. Not to give up on the things that you want to write about and the characters you want to portray. So thank you for that very inspiring and honest answer.
You're welcome. I think as writers, Kathy, whether you're starting the business, you've been in it a while, we are people that live within the interior. And then when that moment comes, when your work has been created, you throw yourself out to the world. It's frightening. And you never know what the world's going to say. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have that initial belief, I'm the one person standing front and center with what I've written. And you put those blinders on, those readers will come. I think at the end of the day, for me in this profession, and there's so many widgets to it, so many different levers and pulleys, so many different ways to do it. But for me, at the end of the day, if I feel proud of that finished product, it's not always about the gold star or so many reviewers. Do you, the writer, did you stay authentic to the craft you wanted to create? That's it for me. And the readers come.
It's a legacy. Who knows what will happen after the first 30 days a book launches.
That's right.
That's just such a blip on the screen. And I think my hero was Van Gogh. I know he wasn't a writer. He was in a way, because he's certainly
a creative. He's a creative.
And how his work just echoes and echoes and echoes. And I think that sometimes when you're writing something that's difficult and before its time, as perhaps you are, I think the time has come. It takes a while for it to catch on, and it also takes the readers a while to find us, right?
Exactly.
Find
exactly. But we have to be comforted, because the shelf life of a book is forever unless somebody burns it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kathleen Rogers says hello and sent us some love a little bit ago when you were talking. And people, anyone who's here, please feel free to comment and question as we go through. So let's dive into this wonderful novel. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired it?
Well, my husband and I are fortunate to have a family place, a gathering place for the family. It's a small place on some acreage about 100 miles from the Texas-Mexico border. And we were able to do that about 5 years ago. And I've been studying the land for 5 years, walking it, noticing how difficult it would be to survive there. I thought a lot about the origins of the land, the first people to live there, the Comanche Indians. They were nomadic, they traveled a lot, following a food source. And then the Spanish explorers, the Irish cedar choppers, because cedar grow prolifically there, and that's what you make the fences out of in that part of the country, not unless you're a very wealthy rancher. So there were already so many stories going on in this land. I was very curious about it. The more time I spent there, the more things started percolating for me. Now, my husband and I receive the weekly newspaper from that area, and it's called the Junction Eagle. Excuse me. So for 5 years, we read this weekly newspaper that is delivered to our home in Mississippi. This newspaper has been in existence since the 19th century. How terrific is that? And we noticed in the crime report, prior, 5 years ago, the crime report was sheriff receives call, cow got out of pen. Teenagers having a great time downtown. So the nearest town, a 30-minute drive, is Junction, Texas. Population about 3,000-4,000.
Right.
That was the crime report. In the last 2 years, and this morning, knowing we were going to talk today, I looked at the Junction paper from last week, crime report. There were 3 incidents of human trafficking in one day. In one day. So I began researching human trafficking. And although this story is set between polar opposite worlds, the United States and Mexico, human trafficking is now the fastest growing crime in the world. Every 30 seconds, someone becomes a victim of human trafficking. The businesses that they're trafficked in, the top are nail salons, landscaping, manufacturing, door-to-door salespeople, and of course the entertainment industry, sex trafficking. And I apologize, entertainment, I also mean by maids, but it can be escorts and things like that. Watched a lot of documentaries, read a lot of books, and I was so far deep into this, I knew I had to begin writing. So because I'm upmarket or literary fiction, I tend to be character-based. I had to create the characters to tell this story. Now, I usually begin every novel with a quote. And I found the perfect quote one day. Not that I was searching for it, but I had been reading in a class I was taking, a virtual class in 2019, 2020, and it comes from Deuteronomy. And pardon me, I'd like to read this to you.
Yes, please.
Because I think it'll help readers and writers understand how I developed the plot. So here's the cover, and this is the beginning quotation that sets the plot for this novel. Cursed be anyone who perverts the justice due to the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. And I knew then I had a plot and I had my central characters. And I always think of that scripture from Deuteronomy as what's the real message, and why is it cursed be someone that harms a traveler in an unknown area, the widow, and the fatherless, because they're the most vulnerable among us.
Right.
And you would have to be a monster to zero in on that and use it against someone. You might see the word throughout the novel, monster, to describe the men that kidnap these girls and bring them across the border in the novel. I chose Hannah because in my TED talk in 21, and Kathy, sometimes I say 21, 2020. It was in 21 November because it was during the same time we had Zeta, a hurricane on the Gulf Coast. And that's how I always remember it. I chose Hannah because in the TED talk, I wanted to speak about women being invisible in our culture, especially after 50. Ageism. I see it in the publishing industry, the marketing industry. I'm amazed at marketing for moisturizers. They use models that are 20. We're smarter than that. So I wanted to speak a lot about ageism and create a heroine who just will not accept it. But also in the book, there's a bit of the theme of the Good Samaritan. And very quickly, I'll go over that parable. A complete stranger comes across a person in need on the side of the road. And it says a lot about the man that helps a complete stranger. And so I really wanted to pose the question to the reader, what would you do? What if you saw a stranger in an unbelievable, horrific situation? Would you walk on? Would you drive on? Would you turn your head, averting your eyes? Or would you be the brave among the brave to help that stranger? It's not my question to answer. It's my job as a writer to present the question. It's up to the reader to decide. There are a lot of political situations within this book or social justice issues. It's not my place to tell the reader what to think. It's my job as a writer to present it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to think or feel. So there are quite a few things that really got me percolating about creating this story. The human trafficking, ageism, life along a border town, Uvalde, Texas.
Right.
About the same size as Junction, Texas, maybe a little bit bigger. Horrific violence. We need to think about it beyond the headlines that last maybe 3 days, a week, maybe 2 days.
Well, the only way I think that you can do that is to tell the story of the individuals, and the 15 seconds on the news at night that people get, or even now on social media, isn't really enough to tell the story of one individual and the next individual and the next. And that's why this book is, and all literary fiction is so important right now in this era. So I always think the way to teach about these social issues is through story, and that's why I love your novel so much. And you do a superb job with deep point of view from each person, even the secondary characters. And so we're able to inhabit their minds and really walk in their shoes. And did you have any revelations as you were writing about these characters yourself as the writer? Not just the
Well,
characters, but the situation, I guess.
I guess the biggest takeaway, I had never written about violence to this degree, and it absolutely wore me out. I've never been this tired after writing a novel. It took a lot out of me because of the emotions in the novel. I'm a mother and a grandmother. The pandemic, violence against young girls and young boys, the horror of the coyotes, the people that promised them the world to come across the border and leave them. A lot, I do want to state this because I don't think a lot of people in this country know this about the border towns in Texas. Are people that have ranches that are near the border, and it's open land. They leave canned goods, bottled water everywhere, clothing. It is not, although I'm sure some people would like to make it a political statement, it's not. This is a statement about the buck stops with human life and the dignity of human life. I'm very proud that the people of Texas realize the horrors of human trafficking, and that these people do not have a chance at the hands of these monsters. And I'm very glad to see in the press lately, the media, they're starting to call it slavery, because that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
modern slavery, buying a human being and entrapping that person so you profit off of it.
Yeah.
But it's not all, as you mentioned earlier, a very sad book. I have some interesting characters, like the sheriff, who is he loves his cheese puffs. He loves to eat. He's a guy that talks and eats all day.
Well, I loved how you set them up. And I would say that other than the actual plot, what happens to the two protagonists, it is an uplifting story. It's rare that you can laugh out loud in such a tense novel, but I was doing it throughout because of them. And there were other situations too, both with Hannah and with Ariella. And I really related to both of them, especially Hannah, being the age I am. But you brought out so many human moments that were funny and everyday in all of them.